They can't make those decisions to disobey moral orders, Mr. Speaker, which is fundamentally another duty under the Statute of Rome. Further, what we say is like their rights are not recognised by other parties. So we think that like in terms of getting them humanitarian aid and all those sorts of things, we think that the other parties in these wars and combats are going to be less likely and less willing to help out the service of theirs because they don't see them as human beings, they see them as a weapon, they see them as a drone. For these reasons, we're proud to oppose.
Thank you, Secretary, for a speech. Now invite third affirmative to close the team status.
Mr. Speaker, let's make one thing clear that should have been crystal clear all the way back from Nick's speech. This debate is not a dichotomy, as Pete wanted to allege in his speech, between fully cognitive human beings that are exact replicas of like Einstein's versus slaves in a compound that have zero cognitive capacity. And what was funny was that throughout their own case, they alternated between the two conceptions themselves. Like when they want to tell us that it completely devalues human life because they are these like completely cognitive like human beings, but then at the same time they want to tell us they have no empathy, they're complete like sociopaths, they're machines that are never going to be able to fully comprehend human life when they make military decisions. So not only was it hypocritical for them to allege for us that we had this mixed up contraception that we never did, and we had it quite consistent throughout our case. But that's how that mixed up conception also screwed them over in this debate. So, with that in mind, let's move now to these two issues. Firstly, is warfare going to be any less moral under our model? And secondly, will there be any harmful impacts to that warfare itself? Let's have a look now at this first issue of whether warfare will actually be less moral under our model. What they first wanted to tell us was that it is always immoral to deny a group in our society of their human rights, given that these clones were humans and that therefore we cannot cut them rights by ever creating a clone brigade in our army. We have two responses to that, right? Firstly, at first, they never gave us a specific right that we were violating by creating this clone brigade. But then at second, it was like they don't have free will, like we're creating human beings that don't have free will. Well, firstly, if they don't have free will, then they're clearly not humans, so they're not abrogating any rights there. But moreover, we'd say that even if we are robbing them of their ability of free will, that wasn't what we told you throughout our whole model, but also we think that that is a greater good in terms of the outcomes we're going to get, and to the largely not responded analysis by the other team of how, like, all the humanitarian benefits that we brought you at Nick, all of the no thank you benefits we brought you about vastly increasing the number of soldiers in warfare. Then they want to tell us that, well, under your model, the government doesn't have any incentive whatsoever to go to war. That's prima facie immoral. No thank you. We had two responses to that. Firstly, we already told you that the calculus is already from an asymmetrical base under our model. That's the way the status quo works. You guys are doing nothing to change that, right? But secondly, we also say that clones aren't free. They cost money. They cost the state resources. But not only that, but leaders of armies also have an incentive to give reports to their superiors that show their successes in battlefields. So we don't think that those individual leaders have an incentive to hand a report to their superior that thousands upon thousands of clones were massacred on this battle site, because that reflects poorly on their own military decisions. So that's how there's still going to be moral accountability up the ranks of the army. We then heard, well, these clones have no sense of humanity, therefore they're going to be committing atrocities left, right, and centre. We have four responses to that. Firstly, we are engineering, as Nick said, as Kristen implicitly said all throughout her case. No thank you. Clones that are inherently of a slightly, that are subservient due to their upbringing and due to the skills and reflexes we give them, where they can naturally succeed in the environment we put them in. If they want to opt out, that's fine. But to that, we think that in terms of them having a sense of humanity and actually being able to be more likely to commit atrocities, we would say that that is not that different from the status quo. If we accept that as true, that is not that different from the status quo where atrocities are being committed by humans, right?
Yeah.
And I'll take you now.
Okay, if you want them to be able to opt out, obviously you care about consent. How can these individuals who sound a lot like humans be able to consent when they're born and bred in the government school and told and bred as if they are soldiers ready to go to warfare? How can you reconcile those two things?
Under that conception, how can anyone that's born in a low socioeconomic background consent to doing the army when they don't have any other viable alternative, like or any other viable educational opportunity, right? Like that's why the government goes and like plunges poor backgrounds in our community in terms of searching for soldiers. Okay, but back with this idea of having a sense of humanity, we'd also say that like from what we heard, that until you have a respect for other opposition, and because these clones are going to be detached from some idea of humanity, they can never understand the result of consequential human loss. So for example, they're going to be more likely to commit atrocities and have casualties. We'd say that respect of humanity isn't necessarily like contingent on being human. Like a non-human entity can have that same appreciation for moral, for like another life, or for collateral damage. And the reason for that is even if you don't measure collateral damage in terms of human lives, you can still measure it as a statistic. And these clones will still be able to have that conception at least. So at the bare bones, they have some ability to measure their own actions. No thank you. Then we heard that like the clones are never going to have the capacity to be free. As we said, they can opt out, and like all their rights of citizenship are completely conditional if they opt out. We're going to be affording them that. Why not? Okay. Then on to the second issue about the impact on warfare. What we heard was that warfare is completely proportional, and that the proportionality of warfare is going to be skewed by our model. Now, I've already explained how war is already asymmetrical, so half that calculus falls down from the outset. But then, even if we agree that somehow it works at some levels where there are two completely proportional forces, what we say is, this concedes all of our analysis about how effective clones are, right? Like, if you guys want to come down and thank you and tell us about how, these are going to be the ultimate weapon, then all of the benefits we brought you, therefore, must stand implicitly, because they must be effective under your own analysis. Then you want to tell us, well, it's never fair to have humans fighting clones in the same way that, we never have humans fighting drones. So therefore, we're never going to have drones, right? And that we just don't support drones, therefore, we're progressively consistent. We'd ask, how are you guys going to ever kill terrorists in the tribal areas of Pakistan without drones? You probably aren't. So all of those harms are forward to your model. And also, we gave you the system that was much better able to deal with all these harms in a more humane way, right? Because the whole point of a drone strike, being able to provide a viable alternative to a drone strike, was that you're not going to have all the collateral damage of killing innocent civilians that one super awesome genetically engineered clone would be able to go into and kill that one terrorist. That was never properly responded to by the opposition team, so that benefit still stands to this debate. Finally, we heard, well, there's never going to be any accountability for these clones. Why the hell not, Mr. Speaker? Why wouldn't these clones be accountable, right? There's still going to be superiors knowing about what they do. There's still going to be other people and other brigades knowing about what they do. They're not going to just be on some magical plane where we're going to have no idea about the actions they commit. That was ludicrous. Finally, they brought us also analysis about how they're going to have lasers and some other shit. Holy fuck, if we accept all that, what the fuck is the point of having this debate?
We'll go to a speech now called the third negative typology finally closes the door.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make an apology. We're sorry for, just guessing that they may not be able to vote. The point where we implied that was probably when they told us they were going to be locking these people in a room for 18 years until we decided, hey, maybe we'll let them choose if they wanted to join the army. We kind of assumed, guys, that you probably wouldn't be giving these people the same rights as everyone else, at the point where you said, we're going to keep you here until you probably feel like joining the army because we're going to educate the shit out of you and tell you that that is your purpose in life. I'm sorry for assuming that they may not have the same rights as everyone else in society. I'm going to look at three things at the end of today's debate. Firstly, is breeding clones for war moral in the first place? Secondly, will this result in better wars being fought? And thirdly, is this essential for the international power dynamic that was the main imperative for their model? So, on to the first issue. Is breeding clones for the purpose of war moral in the first place? Pete gave you a heap of analysis about why we thought the principle of cloning in the first place was bad. We told you that it was completely immoral to breed people for the sole purpose of saying your job is to fight for us in wars. Wars where you will most certainly die and lose your life. We don't think it is ever moral to make a separate class of people for the sole purpose of fighting our wars, wars that we want for our own political and military means. No thank you, right? So what did they tell us? No, we're going to give them rights because when they turn 18, we're going to say, you can fight in our army or you can go be free and do lots of other fun things, right? So, let's look at those two scenarios. In the one scenario, right, they're locked away, they have no exposure to the outside world, they don't really know what's going on. At that point, they human rights, right? But at the point, let's consider the other situation where they are self-aware, they know that they live in this world, they know there are other people around them that have different rights to them, that aren't raised in this way, right? Why is that on its own harmful? Because they know that they have been raised for this specific purpose, and that purpose is to be raised as military machines to fight and to die. We don't think that is moral, and we think that is emotionally harmful to those clones themselves. We didn't have a response from that, right? Then we heard from KP, well no, they have a choice because we're just educating them. And at the point where they turn 18, they get a choice, right? They get a choice where they want to join the army and fight for the US, or they can opt out, they can go do their own thing. Let's again examine those two scenarios, right? On the one hand, if they really do have genuine choice, right, what possible incentive would these people have to stay and fight, right? Because I don't know, if I was given a choice to probably face certain death where my government is going to use me indiscriminately in war, I would probably say rather like go have a normal job and maybe raise a family, maybe have some fun in life rather than go die in a war, right? So they lose all of the benefits that they wanted to talk about, right? But let's look at the other hand. On the other hand, they're educating these people, telling them the army is great, you should join the army, your purpose is to join the army, right? So, and they basically said, well, we're going to engineer them to basically, not be able to question decisions very well. Do you mean that their consent may be vitiated in some way? I don't think at the point where you guys wanted to say that they have a choice, they genuinely do have a choice. Because for your model to be effective, guys, you have to hammer into them that they should go fight for the US, they should defend their country, they should do all of those things. At that point, we don't think they have a meaningful choice to choose this, and we think that you're just basically creating for the purpose of fighting. Yes.
Why is it more immoral to encourage clones to join the army than it is to let thousands and perhaps eventually millions of Syrians die because we don't have enough troops to send out?
Okay. We don't think we should intervene in Syria. We think at the point in which you have a lot of troops, you'll probably do that without thinking about the consequences. We think the fact that you don't have enough troops means you have to carefully think about what sort of wars you're fighting. That brings me nicely onto this next point. Will this result in better wars being fought? Nick said, well, this is great because we will more easily be able to enter wars in the first place. Yes, that is the problem, guys. Josh told you that this creates bad wars because you create people that are essentially indisposable, and we think that's bad. We heard from the affirmative, no, we're not disposing of them. They have rights, they are people. No, guys, yes, but like even if you give them human rights, like functionally in the sense that yes, we're giving you human rights, right? The problem is they don't have links to society. They don't have a family who's going to vote against the government when that war goes to shit because that person has died in that war because they don't have a family, guys. They're a clone. They don't have those links to society. No, thank you. We don't think as a result you're going to have best wars being fought because they don't have those links to society. They don't have family who are willing to protest against a war because they may have lost them in that war that was fought badly. We think that's something that's fundamentally harmful. And to answer your question about Syria, right? We think we need to acknowledge that there are some places we should not intervene in. At the point in which it becomes easy to intervene in those countries, we think governments are more likely to make quick decisions about intervening. We think that's a bad thing. We think at the point in which you do have a limited number of troops, you have to think very carefully about what conflicts you want to intervene in, what ones are the most important conflicts. We think that's a good thing. We don't think Syria is a good conflict. We don't think we should intervene because the government is just as fucked as the rebels. So we think at the point in which you have to think carefully about that, you're probably not going to intervene, and that's probably a good thing, right? They said, well, these people will be conditioned to fight and not question orders, but they will also feel emotion. Like, you guys can't have it both ways. Either they function to follow instructions, at which point they're probably going to do things indiscriminately, and they're probably going to be more likely to kill than capture, something we think is not always good, right? So we don't think that's a good thing. On the other hand, if you're giving them emotions, you're essentially saying that, well, you guys are fighting, we're creating you for the purpose of killing, and we think that is entirely destructive to those clones. So we don't think you guys can win any side of that. So, last issue in this debate. Is this essential? No, thank you, for the international power dynamic that they wanted to have as their main imperative for this debate. Nick told us China. China is really bad. We need to have an army to counter them. Josh told you a few reasons why we don't think this holds up. Firstly, right, at the point in which this is important, we'd rather breed more people, because at least when you breed more people, you have them linked to families, linked to society, and all the harms that I wanted to point to about people not having families who could get angry at wars that go bad fall out the window. So we think that's at least good. But secondly, we don't think by China inherently having a big population that necessarily means they're going to be a threat. But thirdly, at the point in which you say we are developing our own clone army because we see you guys as a threat, we think that means that China will be more likely to react in kind and say, well, the US are doing this. Why are they doing this? Maybe they want to go with a war with us. Hey, maybe we should develop our own clone army. We think this escalates both sides, guys. But four, to the extent that they wanted an end game, we think we already have nuclear weapons. We already have that mutually assured destruction, which means that the benefits that they wanted to talk about don't make sense. The last thing we heard from KP was, well, there are other situations like Taiwan, Tibet, maybe we should intervene in those. We never heard a reason why the US should get involved in those conflicts in the first place. Mr. Speakers, for all of those reasons, we don't think creating clones is moral in the first place, but even if it was, we do not think it will lead to the benefits of better wars that they wanted to talk about. We proudly oppose.
You can all please leave the room, go downstairs.